Diddy's Black Book just expose. Kash Patel just confirms it. Diddy ran a trafficking network. The air in the federal courthouse was thick with tension. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the hallways outside buzzed with reporters, their phones raised waiting for a glimpse. Inside, the trial of Sean Diddy Combs was about to begin. Not as a mogul, not as a rapper, but as a federal defendant accused of crimes so dark the government invoked RICO statutes to unravel them. At the center of it all stood Colonel Pam Bondi, not just a prosecutor, a presence. Known for her fierce courtroom demeanor and razor-sharp cross-examinations today, she was calm, poised, dressed in navy blue, with her blonde hair pulled into a precise bun. She turned to face the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady but forceful, "this is not a trial about fame. This is about power. About a man who used his fame as a weapon to traffic, to intimidate, to silence." Across the room, Diddy sat still, dressed in a designer gray suit expression unreadable. Behind him, his legal team whispered, but he didn't flinch. Bondi continued. She laid out the foundation of the case: years of psychological manipulation, forced labor, and systematic abuse, all protected behind a wall of celebrity and cash. You'll hear from people who cleaned his hotel rooms, people who were ordered to buy drugs, people who saw what happened behind the velvet ropes. Then she paused, looked the jury in the eye, and you'll hear from Cassie. In the gallery a hush fell. Cassie Ventura. The name alone carried weight, not just a former flame, but the center of years of speculation. Now, for the first time, she would speak under oath. When Bondi returned to her seat, it was time for the defense. Tenny Garago stood smooth-polished, confident. "This isn't a trial," he said. "It's a spectacle, a political prosecution disguised as a case." He blamed the media. Blamed opportunists. He painted Diddy as a target. Yes, he's made enemies. That's the price of success. But lies don't become truth just because you say them on the witness stand. The jury didn't flinch, but Pam Bondi's eyes narrowed. Then came Kash Patel, former chief investigator for the House Intelligence Committee. Now representing the FBI, he was their key expert witness and liaison. He took the stand with a manila folder and a calm demeanor. "Operation Black Velvet," he said. "That's what we called the investigation. It spanned 5 years. It involved over a dozen federal agencies. It started with a whisper. It ended with a raid." The room leaned in. Patel detailed the raid on Diddy's Miami mansion. 20,000 square feet, 90 federal agents. We found prescription drugs not registered to the defendant, firearms with serial numbers scratched off, communications devices, 3 phones hidden inside luxury boots. Then he held up photographs. Black Sharpie messages scrawled across bathroom mirrors. "You are a legend. You are untouchable." The jury stared. One photograph showed a suitcase, inside a loaded .45 caliber handgun. Another showed shelves, rows of lubricant bottles, baby oil, and sex toys. Patel's tone never changed. Pam Bondi stood again. "Mr. Patel, how did the FBI interpret these findings?" "They indicated premeditated coercion," he replied. "The use of fear control and drug-induced compliance, consistent with trafficking operations." "Was there evidence of electronic surveillance?" "Yes, several storage drives, footage, multiple angles, bedroom interiors." The courtroom was silent. Pam Bondi turned back to the jury. "What you're about to hear may disturb you. It should. Because what happened behind closed doors wasn't consensual. It was calculated." She sat. The judge nodded. "The government may call its first witness." Cassie Ventura took the stand. Her hands shook. She didn't look at Diddy. Didn't look at the crowd. Just straight ahead. "He told me I owed him everything. That I wouldn't survive without him. That love was obedience." Bondi approached slowly. "Ms. Ventura, were you ever forced?" Cassie took a breath. Then another. "Yes." The word echoed. In the gallery, reporters scribbled. Phones buzzed. In the defense bench, Garagos crossed his arms. The trial had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Pam Bondi stood motionless before the jury box. Her heels didn't so much as tap against the marble floor as she pivoted and faced Judge Chen. "Your Honor," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass, "we request to call our next witness. A man who spent more time cleaning up after Mr. Combs than living his own life." Judge Edward Chen adjusted his glasses, clearly annoyed by Bondi's intensity. "Proceed," he muttered. "But control the theatrics, Colonel." The courtroom doors opened. George Kaplan entered stiffly, lips drawn tight. His face looked pale, his eyes haunted. But there was something else too, shame. He raised his right hand, swore the oath. Bondi wasted no time. "Mr. Kaplan," she began, stepping forward, "please tell this court what Mr. Combs required of you, while working as his personal assistant." The gallery leaned in. Reporters' pens froze midair. Kaplan took a breath. "He asked me to clean up hotel suites, after private events. I'd arrive once he left. I saw condoms, drug residue, bottles of baby oil." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "Were you ever asked to obtain illegal substances?" Bondi asked. "Yes." "And did you comply?" Kaplan looked down. "Yes, twice." Bondi let the silence hang like smoke. Then she stepped back. Kash Patel stood at the ready. He approached the stand like a man walking into war. "Mr. Kaplan," Kash said calmly, "how were the substances procured?" Kaplan's throat twitched. "I was handed cash, a phone number. I met someone in a parking lot in Miami. Then again in L.A. I knew what was in the bag, which was MDMA, the first time. The second, I didn't look. Why didn't you say no?" Kaplan's jaw tightened. "Because no one says no to Sean Combs, not if they want to keep their job, or their teeth." Gasps, audible now. Bondi rose again. "Mr. Kaplan, would you describe Mr. Combs as—" "Volatile." Kaplan's voice shook. "He once screamed in my face because I brought back 2 half-gallon water jugs instead of 1 one-gallon jug. He told me he's only to be surrounded by the best." I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. Pam turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we submit this as Exhibit C, a documented pay record showing Mr. Kaplan working over 100 hours per week. No overtime, no health care. Pure exploitation." Judge Chen's face remained unreadable. Then came the cross-examination. Diddy's lead attorney, Tenny Garagos, rose smoothly. Expensive suit, deliberate smile. "Mr. Kaplan, you were paid $125,000 per year." "Correct, yes." "That's hardly slavery, wouldn't you say?" "It was a cage," Kaplan replied. "A well-furnished one." Garagos smirked. "And yet you stayed. I was scared." Garagos leaned in. Of what Kaplan's voice cracked, of being blacklisted, of being followed, of being found. For a moment the defense had no comeback, just the sound of rustling notes. Then Bondi stepped forward again, not to speak, but to rest her hand on the stand in front of Kaplan. "We thank you," she said, "for speaking." Then she turned to Judge Chen. And now she announced the court will hear from the federal agents who entered the home that hid everything. Kash Patel rose. "Your Honor," he said, "the Bureau would like to present evidence obtained from the March 25th raid on Mr. Combs' Miami residence." Judge Chen waved him on, barely concealing his irritation. An officer wheeled in the evidence cart. Kash opened a black folder. Photographs A through F, master bedroom drawer. Contained 25 bottles of baby oil, 31 bottles of lubricant, a green and yellow rubber duck. Laughter threatened to escape from a few spectators, but no one dared. Kash's voice dropped a register. "In the guest house," he said, "we found a red suitcase containing a .45 caliber handgun loaded. Serial numbers intact. In the primary closet, 2 AR-style rifles. Serial numbers scratched out." Now the courtroom was dead silent. Pam Bondi stood up again. "This wasn't a bedroom," she said. "It was a stage." Judge Chen shifted uncomfortably, and the man directing the performance, she continued, stood above the law. The defense objected. Chen sustained it half-heartedly, but the words lingered like a bruise. Kash Patel opened one final folder, 3 hidden cell phones, found inside a pair of Balenciaga boots, and a wooden case labeled Puffy containing MDMA and psilocybin, and in the bathroom Bondi added, messages written in black Sharpie and lipstick. "You're a legend, Puff Daddy. What do you want?" And simply upward motion. She paused. "This isn't art. This is evidence." The jury said nothing, but one woman in the front row nodded just once. Then came the final blow. Pam Bondi clicked a remote. The projection screen lit up. An image from the master bedroom closet, 2 assault rifles, just inches from a shelf stacked with stilettos, oil bottles, and bondage accessories. She looked to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "this was not just perversion. It was power, and it was weaponized." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the projector screen was taken down, but the image it left behind, those rifles sitting beside stiletto heels and sex toys, remained burned into the jury's minds. Pam Bondi turned and nodded toward the government's next witness. "Dr. Dawn Hughes," she said, "expert in trauma and abuse psychology." The courtroom doors opened. Dr. Hughes entered with measured steps. Her posture was professional, her face composed, but her eyes held the weary wisdom of someone who'd heard too many stories like this. Under oath, she sat tall. Kash Patel handed her a thick folder, case studies, research, background evaluations. Pam Bondi didn't waste time. "Dr. Hughes," she began, "have you reviewed the accounts provided by Ms. Ventura?" "I have." "Have you also reviewed testimonies by other witnesses, staff assistants, and previous accusers?" "I have." Bondi took a slow step forward. "And based on your experience, would you say there is a recognizable pattern of psychological abuse present in this case?" Dr. Hughes didn't blink. "Yes. A pattern of coercion, trauma bonding, and power imbalance." "Define trauma bonding for the jury, please." "It is a psychological response where a victim forms an emotional connection with their abuser, often due to cycles of abuse followed by intense affection. This dynamic creates confusion, dependence, and silence." Pam nodded. "You're referring to the so-called honeymoon phase?" "Yes," Dr. Hughes said. "It's common in domestic abuse. After each violent or coercive event, the abuser will often flood the victim with affection, gifts, apologies, promises. It reinforces the cycle and makes the victim believe the abuse was a one-time event." The gallery was still. Even Judge Chen had stopped fidgeting with his pen. "Did Cassie Ventura describe such cycles?" "She did, in both her prior statements and physical behaviors, curling into a ball during violent episodes, self-medication with drugs to endure events, and returning to the relationship multiple times." Bondi allowed the silence to speak for itself. Then Kash Patel stood. "Dr. Hughes," he said, "can trauma alter memory?" "Yes," she replied. "Trauma doesn't erase memory. It distorts it. Victims might recall specific sensory details, the smell of a room, a sound, the position of objects, more than clear timelines." "Which explains," Kash added, "why some testimonies are fragmented." "Exactly," Hughes confirmed. "Memory fragmentation in trauma is normal. It's not a sign of dishonesty, it's a sign of survival." Defense attorney Tenny Garagos rose like a snake in silk. "Dr. Hughes, how much are you being paid for your appearance today?" $6,000, she said firmly. "Plus $600 an hour for prep work." Garagos smiled coldly. "And how many times have you testified on behalf of men accused of sex crimes?" "I do not evaluate alleged offenders. I specialize in trauma response." "No further questions," he said with mock courtesy. Pam stood and addressed the court. "Let the record reflect that Dr. Hughes has been used as a witness by both prosecution and defense in numerous high-profile cases, including those involving the defense counsel's own firm." Judge Chen gave a terse nod, but the real tension was still coming. Pam turned. Your Honor, we now call Special Agent Gerard Gannon, Homeland Security. Agent Gannon approached with quiet authority, flanked by a rolling cart containing sealed evidence bags. Agent Gannon Bondi began, "You led the March raid of Mr. Combs' Miami property." "I did." "Tell the court what you found." He opened the first bag. This, he said, holding it up, was recovered from a wooden box engraved with the word Puffy. Inside MDMA capsules and psilocybin street name magic mushrooms. He opened another. 3 mobile phones, hidden in a pair of Balenciaga boots. One phone had encrypted messaging apps installed and deleted just hours before the raid. He held up a final bag. A 9mm pistol. Loaded. Serial number removed. The courtroom stirred again. Pam approached slowly. "Were there signs this weapon had been fired recently?" "Yes. The barrel was warm when seized and residue was detected." "Did you find surveillance equipment?" "Yes," Gannon confirmed. "A central server housed under the guesthouse staircase. Dozens of video files, time-stamped, encrypted, cataloged by first names only." "Were the recordings of consensual acts?" "Some may have appeared that way," Gannon said carefully. "But based on accompanying testimonies, we believe multiple videos depict coercion, intoxication, and non-consensual acts." Pam didn't speak. She simply let those words fall into the room like lead. When Agent Gannon stepped down, Kash Patel stood one last time for the day. "Your Honor," he said, "we request that the prosecution be allowed to introduce limited video evidence in camera viewed privately by the jury due to the explicit and traumatizing nature of the content." Judge Chen sighed. "The request is taken under advisement. Submit a list of timestamps and descriptors by morning." Pam nodded tightly. "We will." And just like that, the day's testimony closed, but the tension did not. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered. Some held signs demanding justice for Cassie. Others called it a political witch hunt. News vans were stacked too deep, and drone cameras hummed overhead. Inside, Pam Bondi gathered her files in silence. Kash Patel stood beside her. "He's unraveling," Kash said under his breath, "piece by piece." Pam didn't look up. "Good," she replied. "Then he'll feel exactly what his victims did, helpless." The next morning began, not with a bang, but with a whisper. George Kaplan, Diddy's former personal assistant, took the stand. He didn't come willingly. "Mr. Kaplan," Pam Bondi began, "you were granted full immunity by the prosecution, correct?" "Yes," he said, adjusting the mic nervously. "I didn't want to speak, but I don't want to go to prison either." The gallery leaned in. Pam stepped forward. "Tell us what you witnessed during your time at Combs Enterprises." George hesitated. "Then I was hired to carry bags, handle travel. Within weeks I was prepping hotel rooms with liquor, candles, condoms, and baby oil. Every time the same setup. And after Pam asked, I cleaned up. Every time," he said, swallowing hard. "Sometimes there were drugs powder on sinks. Sometimes blood." Murmurs rippled through the room. "And the drugs," Kash Patel cut in, stepping beside Pam. "Did Mr. Combs ever ask you to purchase them?" George nodded. "Twice. Once in Miami, once in L.A. He gave me Cash a burner phone and told me where to meet the dealer." Pam's tone hardened. "Do you know what was in the bags?" "In Miami it was MDMA. I saw it." The courtroom fell silent. That moment, a staffer testifying to drug runs to cleanup jobs after coercive sex acts wasn't just explosive. It was the predicate act Pam Bondi had been waiting for. Kaplan continued. "Diddy yelled a lot, threatened me, told me I was replaceable, said he only keeps the best around." "And did you feel trapped?" Kash asked. "Every damn day." Pam closed her binder. "No further questions," she said. And with that, George Kaplan stepped down, not just as a witness, but as one of the first insiders to expose the machinery of Diddy's alleged empire from within. The prosecution's case was no longer a collection of stories. It was now a system of silence, fear, and control, and it was cracking. Day 9 began with a name already whispering through every hallway: Kid Cudi. The rapper's testimony had been anticipated all week, and finally the courtroom doors opened to reveal him. He entered quietly without entourage or sunglasses, his jaw tight. As he passed the defense table, Diddy didn't look up. Pam Bondi stood to begin. "Mr. Cudi, you were once romantically involved with Cassandra Ventura, correct?" "Yes." "And during that time, did Mr. Combs ever threaten you?" Kid Cudi didn't hesitate. "Cassie told me he said he would blow up my car." The courtroom murmured, but Pam lifted a hand. "And did your car in fact explode?" A pause. "Yes, in my driveway. A few weeks later." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Kash Patel stepped forward with a document. "This police report from Los Angeles Fire confirms the vehicle explosion. No accelerants were found at the scene, but the incident was ruled suspicious." Kid Cudi added, "I didn't press charges. I was scared." Pam's voice remained steady. "That fear, did it impact your relationship with Ms. Ventura?" He nodded. "We ended things. I told her I couldn't protect her. Or myself." Pam let that settle, then turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, intimidation is not abstract. It's not just words. When a man says he'll commit violence, and then that violence happens, it's not paranoia. It's a pattern." Kid Cudi stepped down in silence. The court recessed briefly, but the room still buzzed when it resumed. And now the prosecution brought in someone new, a forensic tech from the FBI. Her role to explain how the 3 phones found in Diddy's Balenciaga boots were unlocked. Pam walked through it methodically. "Inside those phones, what did you find?" "Videos," the tech said flatly. "Dozens. Some appeared to show women under the influence. Some may have been unaware they were being recorded. Pam didn't play any footage. She didn't need to. The mere mention of those images, a glimpse into Diddy's private archive, landed like a hammer. And then Kash Patel brought it home. These weren't just trophies, he said. They were tools of blackmail, of control. This was not just misconduct. This was organized. By the end of the day, a phrase began to circle the press gallery: sex, drugs, and surveillance. The prosecution wasn't just telling stories anymore. They were mapping a machine. And the man at its center, Sean Combs, was no longer just a musician. He was the architect. As the trial entered its 10th day, tension thickened. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters had their pens ready, sketch artists sharpened their charcoal, and the buzz was deafening even before the judge walked in. Pam Bondi, sharp in a dark navy suit, opened with a statement that landed like a lightning bolt. "Your Honor, the prosecution calls its final witness, Special Agent in Charge Kash Patel." A ripple surged through the room. Kash took the stand with precision and poise. Unlike earlier witnesses, he wasn't here to relive trauma. He was here to assemble it. "Agent Patel," Pam began, "you led the coordination of the federal raids on Mr. Combs' residences, correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Miami, Los Angeles, and Manhattan. Simultaneous operations authorized by a federal warrant." "And what was the scope of your findings?" Patel leaned forward. "We uncovered digital evidence, narcotics, illegal firearms, with scratch serials, surveillance devices, and coded ledgers." "Ledgers, yes," he replied. "Diddy maintained records: who attended what events, who was paid, who flew in, and which substances were distributed." The jury visibly stiffened. Pam handed him a document. "Can you confirm Exhibit 57, this ledger page, dated February 9th, 2020, lists both controlled substances and women's names under coded aliases?" "Confirmed." Kash then described encrypted texts recovered from the Balenciaga boot phones. Messages where handlers discussed payments, freak-off prep, and hush money arrangements. One message, he noted, from a staff member read, "Don't forget the burner. She saw the camera light last time." Gasps echoed. Pam allowed it to sit. Then, "Agent Patel, in your professional opinion, Was this operation consistent with a trafficking network? Kash didn't flinch. Absolutely. Structured hierarchy, record-keeping, coercion, transport, and concealment. This meets the criteria of federal racketeering and human trafficking statutes. The silence that followed was crushing. Then came the defense. Teeny Geragos Diddy's lead attorney rose. Agent Patel, you claim this is an enterprise, but couldn't this simply be an eccentric celebrity lifestyle? Patel didn't blink. I've seen eccentricity. This was systemic. But no victim has testified to being trafficked across state lines, correct? Ms. Ventura under seal confirmed she was flown to Nevada, Miami, and New York at Mr. Combs' instruction. So did 3 others whose identities are protected, Pam interjected. Your Honor, we'd like to admit sealed depositions from these 3 victims. Judge Craverman nodded. So entered. The defense slumped, a final nail. By closing arguments, Pam Bondi stood tall before the jury. This wasn't chaos. It was a plan, a network of enablers, a pyramid built on fear. Kash Patel added the weight. The FBI doesn't indict music. We indict crimes. There was no after-party. This was a prison built with money maintained with silence. The jury stared at Sean Combs. Once a mogul, now a man is undone. And the curtain fell not on a verdict, but on a man stripped of myth. The courtroom emptied slowly. Outside, reporters rushed to break the story. But inside, justice had already begun to write its coda.